On September 15, 2018, search teams found Cecilia Mangrove's empty campsite in Olympic National Forest, Washington. She was a scientist who had left 3 days earlier, but her broken phone and camera gear hinted she'd encountered something unusual in the wilderness, sparking the most mysterious disappearance in the Pacific Northwest.
It's an elusive creature.
Cecilia, a 29-year-old environmental scientist and avid hiker from Portland, Oregon, set out on September 11, 2018. She packed her gear for what should have been a routine 3-day expedition. The destination was Whisper Creek Trail in Olympic National Forest, a place so isolated that park rangers joked it saw more bears than hikers. But that's exactly what made it perfect for Cecilia's research on old-growth forest recovery. What she didn't realize was just how far from civilization she was traveling, or that this remote stretch of forest, rarely visited by humans, might be hiding something extraordinary, something out of legend, something the locals whispered about but few had ever seen, and something they called Bigfoot. What her family didn't know was that Cecilia had spent that day methodically documenting the forest. Between 6 and 8 p.m. on September 11th, she took over 100 photos, far more than her usual evening routine. As an environmental scientist studying forest recovery, she typically photographed tree formations and growth patterns. But that evening was different. Her camera focused on areas where vegetation grew unusually thick and trees had strange, irregular shapes. Her research journal, found later at the campsite, revealed why. Detailed notes described strange wildlife signs and unusual disturbances in the forest floor. The final entry, dated September 11th at 10:30 p.m., described something large that had recently moved through the area. Broken branches 8 feet high and unusual track marks near the creek. She planned to investigate further the next day. The weather stayed perfect throughout the night, with clear skies and calm winds. According to weather data, conditions were ideal for the wildlife watching and photography work that Cecilia had planned for the next day. Nothing in the weather suggested any reason to worry about her safety or the success of her trip. September 12, 2018, started like any other day for people waiting to hear from Cecilia Mangrove. According to the detailed plan she had submitted to both her employer and the Olympic National Forest Ranger Station, she was supposed to pack up camp early and hike the remaining 4 miles to Summit Lake, where she planned to set up her main research base. No one expected to hear from her during this day, since the deeper wilderness areas of Whisper Creek Trail had no cell phone coverage. Cecilia had noted this in her planning documents and had also informed both her brother Marcus and her boss. Her satellite communication device, a Garmin InReach Explorer that she carried on all solo trips, was set to send automatic location signals every 4 hours during daylight. The device sent its final signal at 6:18 a.m. on September 12th, showing her position at the campsite where she had spent the night. After that time, the device went completely silent. This was unusual, but not immediately scary, since satellite coverage could be spotty in the thick forest of the Olympic Peninsula. September 13th was the day Cecilia was supposed to come back. Her plan said she would pack up camp at Summit Lake by 8 a.m. and hike back to the trailhead, getting there by 4 p.m. Marcus Mangrove had arranged to meet her for dinner in Portland that evening, something they always did after each of her major solo trips. When 6 p.m. came and went without a word from his sister, Marcus started calling her cell phone. All calls went straight to voicemail. At first, Marcus wasn't too worried. Cecilia had been late coming back from hikes before, usually because she found something interesting to research, or the trail was harder than expected. She was careful about safety, but also passionate about her work, and he knew she might stay longer if she discovered something scientifically important. However, as the evening went on and his calls kept going unanswered, he started to worry more. By 10 p.m. on September 13th, Marcus had left 12 voicemails and sent many text messages. He also checked Cecilia's Instagram account, hoping to see a post explaining why she was late, but her last update was still the campfire photo from September 11th. This was very unusual, Cecilia usually posted daily during her trips, and she had never gone more than 24 hours without some form of communication during a solo hike. September 14th brought more worry. Cecilia was scheduled for a 9 a.m. conference call with her research team at work, something she had never missed. When she didn't join the call, her supervisor, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, immediately contacted Marcus. By noon, both Marcus and Dr. Walsh had driven to the Whisper Creek trailhead, where they found Cecilia's Honda CR-V exactly where she had parked it 3 days earlier. The car was locked and undisturbed. Her spare key, which she always hid in a magnetic case under the rear bumper, was still there. Inside the car, they found her purse, wallet, and a detailed backup copy of her research notes, things she never would have left behind if she had returned safely. Most concerning was finding her emergency contact card on the dashboard, which listed Marcus's phone number and included specific instructions about when to contact authorities if she failed to return. At 2:47 p.m. on September 14th, Marcus called the Olympic National Forest Ranger Station to report his sister missing. Ranger Elena Vasquez, who had processed Cecilia's backcountry permit, immediately understood how serious the situation was. Cecilia was known to park staff as an experienced and reliable hiker who always followed safety rules. Her failure to return as scheduled was completely unlike her. The first response was quick but limited. 2 park rangers hiked the first 3 miles of Whisper Creek Trail that afternoon, calling Cecilia's name and looking for any signs of her. They found nothing unusual on the main trail and returned to organize a bigger search effort for the next day. September 15th marked the beginning of the official search and rescue operation. At dawn, a team of 12 searchers, including park rangers, volunteer search and rescue people, and a dog unit, entered the Whisper Creek Trail. The search team had GPS devices, emergency medical supplies, and communication equipment to coordinate their efforts across the challenging terrain. The most important breakthrough in Cecilia Mangrove's disappearance came from finding her iPhone 8, discovered by search and rescue teams 50 yards downstream from her abandoned campsite. The device was lodged partly underwater in Whisper Creek, trapped between 2 rocks in shallow water. Despite significant water damage and a badly cracked screen, crime lab technicians were able to recover much of the phone's data, though some files were partially corrupted. What they could reconstruct revealed a chilling sequence of events that appeared to occur in the early morning hours of September 12, 2018. According to the phone's metadata, Cecilia's final photo sequence began at exactly 6:23 a.m. The first image was deceptively ordinary, a golden sunrise streaming through the trees, captured from inside her tent. The composition suggested she had woken naturally, starting her day with routine environmental documentation, photographing the forest floor and light patterns. The photo was calm, almost serene, masking the ominous events about to unfold. 2 minutes later, at 6:25 a.m., the second photo marked a dramatic shift. Cecilia had intentionally focused on a massive footprint pressed deep into the muddy ground beside Whisper Creek. Analysis revealed the print measured approximately 18.5 inches long and 7.2 inches wide, with clearly defined toe impressions and a skin-like texture along the pads. The depth suggested the creature weighed far more than any known wildlife in the Olympic Peninsula. It was unlike a bear, elk, or human, and the freshness of the imprint suggested it had been made while she slept in her tent just yards away. At 6:28 a.m., Cecilia's third photo captured the tree line about 30 yards from her campsite. At first glance, it seemed like a routine forest shot, but digital enhancement revealed a dark, upright silhouette, partially hidden among the evergreen branches. The figure appeared unusually tall, roughly 8 feet, and moved in a way that didn't match any known animal in the region. Judging by the angle and framing, Cecilia seemed to have paused briefly, adjusting her camera to capture the figure without drawing attention. Leaves rustled beneath it, branches snapped softly, and a shadow swept across the clearing. Even through her scientific lens, the scene was extraordinary, unsettling, and completely unexpected. The fourth photo, taken at 6:31 a.m., showed Cecilia's face, wide-eyed and tense, her mouth slightly open as if holding her breath. Reflections in her eyes hinted at movement in the tree line, though the background remained blurry. The image captured both her terror and the realization that she was witnessing something extraordinary, something unlike any known wildlife. At 6:34 a.m., Cecilia's phone recorded a 47-second audio clip that sent chills through forensic analysts. Her whispering voice, punctuated by shallow, rapid breaths, indicated panic but also intentional documentation. Overlapping her voice were the sounds of footsteps on leaves, snapping twigs, and a low, guttural noise. The tonal quality of the sound was unlike any known mammal or bird call in the region. Midway through the clip, Cecilia's voice surged, narrating rapidly and carefully, noting movement, proximity, and behaviors of whatever she had encountered. Then, abruptly, a loud crack, a tree branch breaking under massive weight, ended the recording, followed by static. The phone likely dropped or was damaged in the scramble that followed. Between 6:25 and 6:36 a.m., her camera, audio, and drafts revealed an escalating encounter. She typed 2 urgent messages she never sent. One to her brother, Marcus, instructing him to check the photos if anything happened, and one to her supervisor, explaining she had discovered something extraordinary that could revolutionize her ecological reports. The unsent messages implied that Cecilia's observation window had been brief, minutes, possibly seconds, before her situation became dire. During the early part of this period, her recordings and notes captured a mix of careful scientific observation and growing alarm. Every detail, the massive footprint, the distant silhouette in the tree line, and the unusual guttural sounds was documented meticulously, highlighting her instinct to record what she was witnessing even as the encounter intensified. The GPS data from her phone painted a frantic picture. After the 6:31 a.m. photo, the device tracked rapid movement away from the campsite, approximately 200 yards in under 3 minutes. Her path was erratic, sudden stops, abrupt changes in direction, and repeated backtracking, suggesting she was moving to both observe and evade. Disturbed brush and broken branches along the route supported the theory that a large creature had been moving near her, if not following her. Enhancing the audio from the camera, experts noted a sequence of steps heavier than a human's, but lighter than a large bear, interspersed with the guttural noises. The sound suggested deliberate observation. The creature was close enough to leave detailed prints, but not immediately visible to her. Cecilia's whispers reveal her scientific instincts kicking in. She notes movement, branch position, and sound direction, documenting the phenomenon while experiencing primal fear. By 6:36 a.m., the situation escalated. Cecilia's satellite communicator attempted to send an SOS via her Garmin InReach Explorer. Only a fragmented message with GPS coordinates was transmitted before the device failed, likely due to damage or environmental interference. This last transmission, combined with the GPS, camera, and audio data, indicated that Cecilia encountered a massive, intelligent, and mobile presence in the forest, one she had been observing intentionally but could not fully escape or communicate about. The investigation into Cecilia Mangrove's disappearance suggests she may not have been entirely alone in the Whisper Creek area during her final expedition. Jake Morrison, a 34-year-old software developer from Tacoma, had been camping about 2 miles north of Cecilia's location on the night of September 11-12, 2018. An experienced backpacker with over 15 years of wilderness experience, Morrison shared a troubling account that aligns loosely with the timeline from Cecilia's digital evidence, hinting that someone, or something, may have been in the area at the same time. Morrison told investigators he woke at 6:30 a.m. on September 12th to a chilling 10-second howl from Whisper Creek, unlike anything he'd heard in his years outdoors. When he returned from checking the area, his campsite was unnervingly tidy, yet altered. Water bottles neatly by the fire ring, boots moved and aligned. Nothing was stolen or damaged, leaving him convinced it was deliberate, too organized to be wildlife mischief. Park Ranger Elena Vasquez, who had worked in Olympic National Forest for 15 years, provided crucial context about the unusual evidence found at Cecilia's campsite. In her decade and a half of investigating wildlife encounters and missing person cases, she said the prints were unlike anything she had documented before. They were larger than bear tracks, wrong shape for humans, and the stride length was unusually long, suggesting something that walked upright. Vasquez's testimony revealed a pattern of unusual incidents in the Whisper Creek area that had been quietly logged but not widely publicized. Over the previous 5 years, 3 separate hikers had reported disturbing encounters in the same region where Cecilia disappeared. Park officials had categorized these as unexplained incidents, but chose not to release them broadly, concerned it might discourage visitors or fuel speculation about the forest. The first incident occurred in September 2014, when a married couple hiked a remote stretch of the Whisper Creek Trail and reported feeling as though they were being followed. For over 2 miles, they heard snapping branches and low, indistinct noises that seemed to come from all around. Shadows shifted at the edges of their vision, disappearing whenever they tried to focus directly on them. By the time they reached the trailhead, they were shaken, convinced that something unusually large had been moving through the forest near them. The second incident occurred in October 2016, when a solo hiker reported several blurry photographs showing a large, upright figure moving among the dense evergreens. The images were grainy, but the shape appeared unusually tall, with movements that seemed deliberate and disturbingly human-like. The hiker also recalled hearing heavy footfalls nearby and low, resonant sounds that seemed to come from different directions within the forest, though it was impossible to pinpoint their source. The third encounter occurred just 8 months before Cecilia's disappearance. A group of college students camping in the area awoke to find their site disturbed, in a way reminiscent of Jake Morrison's later report. Tents were partially torn, supplies had been moved, and unusually large footprints, estimated at around 6 feet in length, were pressed into the soft ground surrounding the camp. Initially, they assumed a bear had wandered through, but the size and spacing of the prints suggested deliberate movement. Some of the students reported catching brief glimpses of a dark, hulking figure at the edge of the tree line, disappearing whenever they looked directly. Perhaps the most significant testimony came from Thomas Clearwater, a 73-year-old Quinault elder, explained to investigators that his people had always considered the Whisper Creek area both sacred and dangerous. According to tribal stories, the forest doesn't take kindly to those who try to take more than they should. Tribal records passed down through generations documented 7 unexplained disappearances in that area over the past century, with most happening in early fall when the forest is said to be most protective. In the weeks following Cecilia Mangrove's disappearance, investigators developed 4 main theories to explain what happened during her final hours in the Olympic wilderness. Each theory was carefully examined against the available evidence, but none of the conventional explanations could adequately account for all the disturbing details recovered from the scene. Investigators looked at several possible explanations for what happened to Cecilia. At first, a wildlife attack seemed most likely. The Olympic Peninsula has black bears and mountain lions that can attack people. Claw marks on her tent and the disturbed campsite suggested a large predator had been there. But this idea fell apart when they looked closer. There was no blood at the scene, despite signs of violence. Even stranger, Cecilia's belongings were carefully arranged, her boots placed neatly together, her camera equipment secured in waterproof bags, and her phone positioned in the creek rather than scattered around. Large predators don't organize things this way. Some thought a human predator might have followed Cecilia's social media posts and tracked her down. This would explain why her belongings were deliberately arranged instead of randomly destroyed. But the massive 18-inch footprints around the campsite were way too big for any human. Audio specialists said the recorded sounds didn't match anything humans or known wildlife could make. Plus, the remote location and difficult terrain made it unlikely a stalker could reach the area without leaving their own evidence trail. Another possibility was that Cecilia had an accident. Maybe she fell into Whisper Creek, got hypothermia or injured, and became confused before dying from exposure. Finding her phone in the water seemed to support this idea at first, but her photos and audio recordings clearly showed she was alert and actively documenting something extraordinary in her final moments. Her pictures were well composed and focused, not the confused work of someone suffering from injury or exposure. Despite searching over 50 square miles, no trace of her body was ever found, though investigators noted that dense terrain can hide remains for years. The most controversial explanation for Cecilia Mangrove's disappearance was a Bigfoot encounter. The evidence was striking. Massive footprints with unusual ridge-like textures, audio recordings of unidentified sounds, coarse hair samples that defied DNA analysis, and a historical pattern of similar sightings in the region. Cecilia's final photos and audio suggested she had come face to face with something that both terrified and fascinated her, something she deemed important enough to document despite the risk. Her behavior mirrored reports from other Pacific Northwest Bigfoot encounters, where witnesses often described simultaneous fear and scientific curiosity. The convergence of physical evidence, witness accounts, and regional precedent made the cryptid theory difficult to dismiss. Skeptics argued that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, but supporters pointed to Cecilia's meticulous documentation as exactly that proof that could have reshaped understanding of the phenomenon had she survived to share it. Analysis of Cecilia's phone, GPS, photos, and audio revealed a clear sequence of events. First, the massive footprint, then a distant silhouette in the tree line, followed by direct auditory interaction, and finally her frantic movements as captured by GPS. Each stage escalated both tension and danger for Cecilia and for investigators reconstructing the encounter. The combination of her careful scientific documentation and the terrifying reality of an unseen, massive presence makes this one of the most compelling modern Bigfoot cases on record. The Olympic Peninsula has long been a hotspot for cryptid activity, with more than 200 documented Bigfoot sightings since the 1950s. What made Cecilia's case particularly significant was how her findings fit into this larger pattern, adding weight to a decades-long series of mysterious encounters. Environmental factors further strengthened the plausibility of her observations. Whisper Creek Trail is remote, with dense undergrowth, fallen logs, and uneven terrain. Sounds carry differently in thick forests, and shadows can conceal movement. For a trained environmental scientist like Cecilia, the combination of unusual footprints, auditory anomalies, and visual evidence made the encounter strikingly credible. In the 2 years before Cecilia's disappearance, the Olympic National Forest received 12 reports of unusual encounters within a 20-mile radius of Whisper Creek. Witnesses described consistent signs, massive footprints, strange sounds, a feeling of being watched, and behavior suggesting intelligence beyond normal wildlife. Park officials largely kept these reports confidential to prevent panic and protect tourism. But Cecilia's case brought them into the public record. What investigators discovered about Cecilia's preparation for the trip added another layer to the mystery. Her browser history revealed extensive research into local cryptid reports in the weeks leading up to her expedition. As part of her work on old-growth forest recovery, Cecilia had been studying the effects of wildlife on forest ecosystems, and she noted that many cryptid reports mentioned undisturbed areas and unusual animal activity. She had visited forums dedicated to Bigfoot encounters, downloaded academic papers about primate behavior, and bookmarked articles specifically about the Olympic Peninsula's history of unexplained sightings. This wasn't casual curiosity. Cecilia appeared to be approaching the search methodically, using her ecological research as a framework for documenting and potentially verifying an extraordinary presence. Dr. Sarah Marvis, a primatologist at the University of Washington, provided crucial expert analysis of the audio evidence recovered from Cecilia's phone. After studying the 47-second recording, Dr. Marvis concluded that the sounds contained acoustic properties unlike any known North American wildlife. The sounds demonstrated a vocal range and resonance that exceeded human capabilities while showing structured patterns that suggested intelligence and intentional communication. The physical evidence was equally compelling. Plaster casts of the footprints around Cecilia's campsite showed detailed textures along the pads and toes, suggesting they were made by a living creature rather than a carved hoax. The stride length, over 6 feet, indicated bipedal movement by a creature significantly larger than any known primate species. Perhaps most intriguing was the behavioral evidence. The careful arrangement of Cecilia's belongings, the organized disturbance of Jake Morrison's campsite, and the historical pattern of similar encounters suggested intelligence and possibly even curiosity about human activities. This aligned with indigenous accounts of forest guardians who observed and interacted with humans in complex ways. The Olympic Peninsula's dense forests, abundant wildlife, and minimal human traffic provide ideal conditions for a large, elusive species to remain hidden. What set Cecilia's case apart was her meticulous documentation and scientific expertise. She captured fleeting evidence that had eluded countless others: subtle movements in the shadows, sounds with unusual patterns, and hints of an unseen observer. The tragedy was that her encounter ended with her disappearance, leaving these discoveries as clues without resolution. Even so, her findings remain controversial. In the scientific community and among the public, many dismiss the case as folklore or suggest Cecilia may have fabricated the clues. Bigfoot sightings in the Pacific Northwest have long been part of local legend, and skeptics argue that extraordinary claims require far more verifiable proof. Yet whispers persist. Hikers near Whisper Creek occasionally discover strange footprints, fresh disturbances, or fleeting glimpses of dark shapes at the edge of vision. Some report hearing low, resonant calls in the early morning mist, eerily similar to those captured on Cecilia's recordings. The forest seems to guard its secrets carefully, revealing just enough to intrigue the curious and unsettle the skeptical. Her disappearance remains one of the most puzzling unsolved cases in Pacific Northwest history. The official investigation, led by the Olympic National Forest Service and Washington State Police, covered over 50 square miles during an intensive 6-day search operation. Despite using helicopters, dog units, and dozens of experienced searchers, no trace of Cecilia's body was ever recovered. The case officially remains classified as a missing person investigation, though most investigators privately acknowledge that Cecilia is presumed dead. Her disappearance prompted significant changes in backcountry safety protocols, with park authorities now strongly recommending GPS tracking devices for solo hikers and requiring communication gear for researchers operating under official permits. Marcus has never stopped searching for his sister. He established a foundation dedicated to wilderness safety, which provides emergency communication equipment to researchers and maintains a database of unexplained wilderness encounters. Marcus continues to organize annual search expeditions, though he admits his focus has shifted from finding Cecilia to understanding what happened to her. 2 weeks after her disappearance, hiker David Chen discovered a cedar tree carving 3 miles deeper into the wilderness than any official search had reached. It showed the initials CM, followed by the words, "They're real," and "Tell the world," with an arrow pointing farther into the forest. Handwriting analysis strongly suggested Cecilia carved it, prompting an additional search in the surrounding area. No further evidence was ever recovered. This discovery raised more questions than it answered. Had Cecilia followed something into the forest? Was she trying to gather more evidence? Or had she been taken somewhere beyond the reach of conventional search efforts? The ultimate question remains. Did Cecilia Mangrove make the greatest scientific discovery of the 21st century, only to pay the ultimate price for her curiosity? Her case continues to inspire researchers, cryptozoologists, and adventurers who believe that somewhere in the vast Olympic wilderness The truth about her final days is still waiting to be discovered.